Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today, we're diving into a movie that's probably made you question your childhood at least once. 1985's Return to Oz, a movie that came out 40 years ago. It's a movie that took the whimsical land of Oz, you all knew from The Wizard of Oz, and twisted it into something far darker and stranger, and maybe even a little terrifying. But the question is, does it still hold up today? Is it the classic we remember, or has it become too weird? Even for nostalgic fans. Well, we're about to find out. Alright, let's dive into the plot of Return to Oz, a movie that's way darker than what most people remember from The Wizard of Oz. So the movie opens up in Kansas, where Dorothy Gale is back after her adventures in Oz. However, people aren't as enthusiastic about her claims that she went to a magical land full of strange creatures. Instead, Dorothy is sent to a mental institution because the grown-ups think that she's delusional. Oh, and her aunt and uncle think the best course of action is electroshock therapy. Because what else would you do with a kid who claims to have traveled to another world, right? But don't worry, Dorothy escapes with the help of Bolina, a talking chicken. Yes, a talking chicken. And together, they make their way back to Oz. When Dorothy finally arrives, Oz is in a very bad state. The Emerald City is in ruins. The yellow brick road is broken and overgrown. And everything that once made Oz a magical land has crumbled. This is a stark contrast to the Oz we saw in the 1939 movie, which was bright, colorful, and full of life. In Return to Oz, the magical land is much darker and grimmer. The Nome King, a sinister, stone-faced ruler, is now the main antagonist. He has the ability to turn anyone into stone statues, which he used to take control of Oz and imprison many of its residents. Dorothy, as always, is determined to set things right, so she begins a journey to restore the land she loves. Along the way, she's joined by new friends.
Okay, Alex, editor Alex here. I realized that I should have done it much better, so let's try this one more time. Along the way, she is joined by new friends, including, in one corner, TikTok, a mechanical man who never sleeps. In another corner, we got Jack Pumpkinhead, who's literally made of a pumpkin. And lastly, we have Belina, her talking chicken companion.
However, they're also haunted by the terrifying Wheelers, who are roller skating creatures with disturbing, exaggerated faces that make them one of the most unsettling aspects of the movie. They chase Dorothy and her friends throughout the ruins of Oz, adding a real sense of danger to the journey. Now, this is where things get a little bit complex. The film introduces Princess Ozma, who is the rightful ruler of Oz. In Return to Oz, Ozma has been trapped in a magical form, disguised as a common girl named Tip. Tip has been raised by a wicked sorceress named Mombi, who uses magic to keep her young and beautiful. Mombi is another one of the movie's creepy antagonists, known for her collection of severed heads that she uses to switch out her own face for different appearances. Yeah, it's that kind of film. As Dorothy and her companions venture through Oz, they learn that Tip is actually Princess Ozma, the rightful heir to the throne. Tip's true identity is hidden from her, and she's unaware of her royal lineage. Dorothy helps uncover Trip's true identity, which leads to her transformation back into Princess Ozma, restoring her powers and solidifying her place as the ruler of Oz. The Nome King, who's responsible for much of the devastation in Oz, plans to keep Ozma from reclaiming the throne. So Dorothy and her friends must face him in a final confrontation. The Nome King uses his powers and tries to deceive them with illusions. But in the end, it's Dorothy's belief in herself and her imagination that helps them defeat him. After Dorothy outsmarts the Nome King and frees Oz from his control, Ozma is restored to the throne, and Oz begins to return to its former glory. Dorothy has helped not just to save Oz, but to restore its true ruler and magic. However, as always, Dorothy must return to Kansas. The film ends with a bittersweet farewell to Oz, as Dorothy leaves the magical world behind, knowing that it will always remain in her heart, that she's stronger because of everything she faced there. Nostalgia versus modern standards. Now let's talk about how Return to Oz was received when it first came out. This movie came out in the mid-80s, a time when dark fantasy was starting to gain traction. Think The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. But Return to Oz is way darker than most people expected. At the time, audiences didn't know what to make of it. Was it a children's movie, a horror movie, or just some strange fever dream? Critics were divided, and the box office numbers weren't exactly glowing. It was way too dark for many kids, and probably too strange for parents who were expecting something lighthearted like the 1939 classic. But over the years, it developed a cult following. People started to appreciate its unique, eerie atmosphere and the oddball characters. So in the realm of nostalgia, it's definitely grown in stature. Return to Oz now holds a place as an underrated gem for those who love offbeat fantasy films, especially fans of the darker, weirdly imaginative side of cinema. Now comparing that nostalgic value to modern standards, well, let's just say things have changed. Today we're used to movies that have a lot more CGI, and there's a shift towards lighter, more polished aesthetics, especially in family-friendly films. So does the charm of Return to Oz still translate to today's younger audiences, or is it a little too strange to be loved by the next generation? You got mixed reviews. For those into quirky, dark classics, this movie still has legs, but it might not have the same universal appeal as it once did. Visual effects. Alright, let's talk about how this movie looks. At the time, Return to Oz was a visual masterpiece, at least for its era. The practical effects, stop-motion animation, and set design were groundbreaking, especially compared to the fully animated worlds we see today. The filmmakers used incredible techniques to bring Oz to life. It's impressive how they achieved these effects without relying on CGI. For example, TikTok's mechanical design is so detailed that still stands out today. The stop-motion scenes, like when Nome King transforms into different forms, are still impressive. You can feel the craftsmanship and dedication that went into making this movie look visually captivating, even if it was a little rough against the edges by modern standards. But here's the thing. Some of these effects have aged not so gracefully. The stop-motion animation, while charming, is a little stiff by today's standards. And some of the practical effects, like the Nome King transformation, now look more comedical than threatening. Still, there's a nostalgic charm to these older effects that's harder to deny. They give the movie a sense of realism, even if it's a slightly dated realism. Tone and atmosphere. The tone of Return to Oz is one of the most striking features of the film. It's a lot darker than the original. From the moment Dorothy's in the asylum, the atmosphere feels unsettling. The sense of dread is constant. You got headless queens, a sinister Nome King, a nightmarish wheelers that still haunt people to this day. It's not a fun, carefree adventure. It's a journey that tests Dorothy's resilience in a way that feels almost too real at times. So how does that darker tone play today? Hopefully it still works. The eerie vibes are timeless, but do kids today connect with it the same way? Maybe not. The horror aspects might be too much for a new generation that's used to family films with happier, less disturbing themes. The film's gothic atmosphere might have been groundbreaking in the 80s, but today it might just feel a bit out of place for younger audiences. However, if you're someone that grew up with it, or if you love the dark fantasy genre, you'll still find that it holds up in a way that's fascinating and unique. Character development and acting. Let's talk about these characters. Dorothy's arc in this movie is deeply personal. She's not just trying to save Oz, but she's dealing with the trauma of being locked away in an asylum. She's still a child, but much more serious than her previous incarnation. And there's a sense of earnestness to the role that really works. It's a different Dorothy, but it's one that fits with the tone of the film. As for the supporting characters, TikTok, Jack Pumpkinhead, and the Nome King, they're all memorable in their own right. TikTok is undoubtedly the standout. He's funny, loyal, and tragic all at once. Jack Pumpkinhead is lovable, but his role is more comedic than anything else. The Nome King, while not as impactful as other villains from the area, it is still a noticeable figure in the story, even if it falls a bit flat compared to the other figures in Oz. Do these characters still work today? Yes, but some of them, especially the Nome King, feel a little less menacing with time. TikTok, on the other hand, is still a fan favorite. Themes and messages. Let's dive into the deeper themes. Return to Oz touches on ideas like trauma, resilience, and the power of imagination. Dorothy's journey isn't just about saving Oz, it's about reclaiming her sense of self and overcoming the mental and emotional struggles she's facing after being institutionalized. The movie's about healing, fighting your inner demons, and believing in yourself, even when the world seems hopeless. These themes resonate just as much today, especially with ongoing conversations about mental health and emotional recovery. The idea of turning to your imagination for solace and strength feels incredibly timely, more so now than perhaps ever before. Soundtrack and music. Finally, let's talk about the soundtrack. The haunting score by David Sher is one of the film's most memorable aspects. It's atmospheric, eerie, and filled with emotion. The music pulls you into the film's strange world, heightening the sense of unease that permeates throughout. Does it still work today? Absolutely. The soundtrack holds up as one of the key elements that make the film stand out, and it still packs an emotional punch. Audience reception today. So what do modern audiences think? Well, the film has maintained a cult following, and it continues to gain new fans who are drawn to its strange, dark charm. It's one of those movies that gets better the more you watch it. And there are still active communities talking about this movie on platforms like Reddit and YouTube. But does it have the same impact as it did then? For younger audiences, it's more of a hit or miss. But the fans who grew up with it, it's a beloved classic that stands the test of time. So does Return to Oz still hold up today? In many ways, yes. It's a dark, strange, and deeply imaginative film that has found its place in cinema history. While some of its effects and characters might feel a little dated, the core themes and atmosphere still resonate. For those looking for something unique, it's a hidden gem. But if you're expecting a light-hearted family adventure, this might be a little bit too eerie. So Return to Oz, cult classic or forgotten relic? I'd say it's a bit of both. It's a reminder of a time when films weren't afraid to be strange and unpredictable. And while it might not be everyone's cup of tea today, it's definitely still hold a special place in the hearts of fans. If you haven't seen it yet, give it a watch and let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. I'll see you next time, hopefully somewhere over the rainbow.